Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 51, recording on Tuesday, January 21st. In the podcast world, what can happen is you're recording early in the afternoon and then news drops, so you got to adapt. That's what we're doing. Kevin O'Connell, if you guys have been living under rocks, received an extension, multi-year extension, as expected, and we're going to get into that, in a second. I also had an idea that I wanted to run through on the back half of this podcast, where I really go through every Vikings player that who is becoming a free agent later this spring. And we're going to go through each individually, kind of talk about what I feel in terms of the odds that they are back. Why not, some of the details around them. So I jotted a few notes. We'll do that on the back half of the podcast. But as always, this show is presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank in the local area. I got my online banking set up last week, and I got to tell you, it is incredibly easy, and it's like this sleek system that I was pretty blown away by. So please go check them out, First Resource Bank. The information to establish an account, to get in touch with the folks over there is down below in the show description. But really, really good people, a great platform. They care about the Vikings, so please go check them out. As always, like I said, I do a couple of these shows a week. It's not going to slow down in the off season. In fact, because it's negative 18 degrees, I might just do 7 a week because I've got nothing else to do but sit inside. No, I really have a question. Like, what is the difference between negative 17 and negative 12? Can you actually feel that? I haven't tested it out because I don't know if I can handle any of it. Anyways, we'll get back to the Vikings. But no, planning to keep the show running in the offseason. I say it all the time. People ask, like, what do you do in the offseason? The answer is it is just as busy. There's roster stuff to figure out, free agency, the draft, the Senior Bowl. I mean, there's a lot going on, a lot of things to get configured and to get figured out. So we'll keep it rolling, and then I'll implement some other ideas that I've had in terms of one-off shows, in terms of guests, in terms of subject matters that in the offseason, for me, it's a great resource to be able to have time to spend learning the game, learning about the salary cap, learning about all the intricacies that go into the analysis. And I thought it'd be cool maybe to bring some of that to you guys, and then bring just some of the conversations that I have about the job that I do and the people who've done it really well. I feel like there's a lot of avenues we could go, but I'm looking forward to spending the time on it. We'll start right now with Kevin O'Connell's extension. Like I said, I mean, it was not a surprise to anyone who's been paying attention at all. I mean, the Vikings never considered trading him. That was never going to happen. I will say Jay Glazer's report that ran on the day of the Lions game was very specific in that he said other teams would be interested in trading for Kevin O'Connell. Now, I think it's interesting, like, to even put that out without also saying that the Vikings would never be interested in doing that. To me, I mean, we could talk journalism. We could go into that. Jay Glazer's done it for a long time. I don't really have anything to say other than that would have been a nice pair probably to the report that ran on Fox that day. And then the Florio stuff I talked about in the last episode, and really don't want to spend any mental energy rehashing that. So you can go listen to that if you want information. But like I said, it was expected. I mean, Kevin O'Connell's 34-17 as a head coach in the National Football League. That is the 5th best record among coaches who have coached 51 games in the NFL. Now, he's tied with like 7 other guys for 5th, but and that's over the last like 20 years. But there's no question the job he's done is unbelievably impressive. And as I was thinking about it this afternoon and putting together stories for The Athletic, I mean, it's not just the X's and O's. It's not just the offensive design. I mean, he's been everything to the culture they've built inside that building. And to take the culture, I know that's such a buzzword that we all use in this business, and I think it's like a very in every business. I mean, you talk about culture and the environment inside a building. I mean, the leader and the person who is the most front facing and the person who has the biggest role, they often set that tone. And so what he's done, I mean, the best line that I've ever gotten in terms of the impact is Brian O'Neill said to me last fall, like, I asked him about the NFLPA report card, which is this report card that players fill out anonymously to kind of grade their organization. The Vikings have been at the top of all NFL organizations the last 2 years. And it'll probably be 3 years when that report card runs this offseason. And Brian O'Neill said to me, like, Alec, Kevin O'Connell is the report card. Like, Kevin is the report card. Kevin is, I mean, again, he's the most front-facing member of the organization. He deals with the most macro type of idea and all the way to the most micro. I mean, everything from practice scheduling to charting processes of evaluating draft prospects. Like, he is integral to all that. I mean, I was thinking about it. Like, there's really no aspect of positivity that we all have seen within this organization over the last 3 years that does not have his fingerprints on it. I mean, like JJ McCarthy and the idea and the hope regarding his trajectory. I mean, the scouting process that led to JJ McCarthy was pieced together and constructed and built by Kevin O'Connell. He had the integral role in all of that. I mean, again, building up Kirk Cousins in that 2022 season, constructing the system that Sam Darnold went out and threw for 4,319 yards and 35 touchdowns in. That a lot of that hinges back and comes back to Kevin O'Connell's impact. I mean, Justin Jefferson, the jersey that you're going to continue to wear, the billboards that you'll see around town, the 18 relevance in purple around, just like even on ads that I see on TV on Little Caesars with Justin Jefferson wearing a Vikings jersey. Like, how much would Justin Jefferson been as committed to staying here as he was if it weren't for the relationship that Kevin O'Connell had built with him and the offense that he'd really designed around him? So again, like, it is the most micro, it's the most macro. It's luring Brian Flores from Pittsburgh and then coaxing ownership to be okay with making that happen. It's, I mean, bringing along Tyler Williams, the director of player health, who had been in that same role with Sean McVay. I mean, that, like, Tyler doesn't leave unless he believes in Kevin O'Connell, and the Vikings don't have as advanced of a performance staff as they do if it's not for Tyler Williams, which is, again, goes back to Kevin O'Connell. So, I mean, Harrison Smith's decision to come back the last couple of years, a lot of that is a tribute to Kevin O'Connell. I could go on and on and on, and the extension is a confirmation that ownership feels like, I mean, like they see it, like they see the impact that he has made for 3 years, and it's also a bet that he continues to push that forward. That it is not like, you don't settle with having won 34 games in 3 years. That it is now about playoff victories. That it's about winning a Super Bowl. I mean, Kevin O'Connell's statement, which is they send in the press release. I mean, he says in the final sentence of his statement is, "I'm thrilled for the years ahead and will continue to give you everything I have as we pursue a Super Bowl for the state of Minnesota." And part of this extension is a bet that those are not just words, that actions follow those words. And so what does that look like? I don't know if it's more influence in the draft process. I've wrote about this in the mailbag earlier this week. I think he's had a lot of influence already. The coaching staff definitely last year before the 2024 draft and last spring, they increased their involvement. I mean, they were coaching at the Senior Bowl. Almost every major coach was at the Senior Bowl, around guys on the field, taking turns on the field. Like, I think the undrafted free agent signings, be it the McGlothers, the Ivan Paces, the Taki Taimani, I mean, that is a lot of coach influence type of stuff. So whether it means rethinking the run game, both the commitment to it, who is orchestrating that. I mean, I think, like, the extension, again, it is a thank you in some ways, but it's also a push, like a thrust forward to continue to take this thing to heights that this organization has not obviously been to. And so, I mean, even like with JJ McCarthy, in terms of his development, it is pursuing every avenue to maximize JJ's mechanics, whether that's biomechanical analysis, and it's pursuing every avenue from a VR cognitive training that you could possibly pursue. And while I know the Vikings have employed some VR stuff, I mean it's seeking what did Jaden Daniels do in Washington? Oh, he's using a system built out of Germany that he also used in college. How does that work? Who are those people? It's charting. I mean, Kevin O'Connell's job. It's spearheading and seeking all of that stuff. I think that's incumbent upon him as the leader of the organization to kind of continue to push things forward in that way. And I expect that to happen because I mean, I don't think you get to this place at 39 years old. I don't think you've had the success that he's had. I don't think you see the awareness of somebody that he's displayed over the last 3 years without being willing to be very self-critical and to really push things forward. So that's what I'd say. Again, like just to come back to the where I started, just not surprising. It just really isn't. I mean, like again, he speaks to the media more than anyone else in the organization. He in terms of publicly, like in terms of front-facing media, like he is the brand. He is the business CEO who goes on CNBC and pitches to their shareholder. He is the one who communicates with ownership. Not that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah doesn't, and it's a good segue. Like I was also told today that the Vikings are in the process of working on an extension for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. What that looks like in terms of years and money and all this stuff, that they try to keep that as private as possible. It is incumbent upon me as the journalist to uncover the answers to these questions. But I've said this before too, and I maybe privately, but I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, it's very interesting. He thinks of things very big picture, very long term, very macro. Like, has he proven over the last 3 years that he is exceptional at drafting players? Absolutely not. I mean, I wrote this last week. I believe they've selected 23 players. The most elite one is obviously Jordan Addison. There are a couple other key contributors, but there's no question if the drafting does not improve, it's going to be really hard to do the things Mark Wolf talks about in his statement, and that is sustain success and build and win a championship. So from Kwesi's perspective, does drafting need to improve? Of course, obviously it does. Is what they did in free agency this past year a sustainable model? No, it is not. Now, with the way they think about things, could that maximize their odds with the decisions they make? I think so. And then to me, it is important to have someone who is not so buried in the day-to-day of winning on Sundays to think of the roster holistically in terms of what builds a championship team. Can we pay at this position and maximize everything else to actually build a championship winning team? And I think Kwesi does a very good job of thinking about things big picture in that way. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. But to hear that that ownership was also exploring an extension with him and that is underway, that's not surprising either. I just it's 2 straight years now that the Vikings have had a major piece of their organization kind of somehow be tossed into the narrative cycle that then becomes, could they trade who, and then people nationally are talking about it and it becomes a conversation and it adds this tension. And to me, it's been very revealing and illuminative of just the way the current media cycle is. I mean, something can emerge from really anywhere, and on social media it proliferates, and then things can just kind of run wild. And once it's out of the bottle, once that stuff enters the ether. There is no telling where it goes, and there's nothing really anybody can do to damp cold to put out the fire until this moment comes where the extension that was always expected happens, and then I guess there's no repercussion for tossing that stuff out in the first place. It's a wild thing. I guess the only reason I talk about it on the podcast is because it is I feel like it's such a direct way for me to speak to you guys who I know consume this stuff. And so I like doing it. I don't know how you guys feel about it, or if any of what I say regarding it makes a ton of sense, but it's just, I think a lot about the media ecosystem, and it makes it harder sometimes to have the credibility that, I've spent 10, 11 years generating when other people in the industry kind of put certain things out. It's a fascinating kind of dynamic, but I will segue from that. If you want more on the extension, what it means, why it happened, all that stuff, please go check out the stories in The Athletic. Have a lot over there. Some details and certain things that I think you guys will enjoy. But I'm going to do what I said I was going to do and what I was planning to do when this news broke. I'd already recorded like 4 minutes of a podcast, and then it happened, so I had to restart. But I'm going to run through all of the Vikings players for 2024 who are projected to hit free agency this spring, and just give you a quick little rundown of each of them, how I'm thinking about it, why I'm thinking about it. These are organized in terms of or lists. I'm going to run through them in the order of what their pay was this past season. It's kind of a weird way to do it, but I thought it made sense. So we'll start with Cam Robinson, who the Vikings obviously acquired after Christian Darrisaw tore his ACL against the Rams in the middle of the season. Cam Robinson is going to be a free agent, and I think the obvious question with him is like, well, could they bring him back either as a backup tackle, as insurance for Christian Darrisaw, or some have even asked, like, could they bring him back and move him to guard? And the first thing I'd say is, it's going to depend on his market, first of all. Like, if another team is willing to pay him X million to be their starting left tackle, that's probably what he's going to want to do. And it's probably not going to make sense for the Vikings to bring him back for that type of money. As for the guard situation, I've said this in writing, but I think the urgency with which this team is going to and must operate to revamp, reconfigure their interior of the offensive line, given that, I don't think it would make sense, or it would be an easy sell to be like, yeah, we're gonna really revamp our interior offensive line. This is not going to be a problem anymore. And here's how we're going to do that. We're going to take a guy who's never played guard, who's 6'5", 335 pounds. We're going to put him there and hope it works. To me, that's a very hard sell. Could he be physical enough, large enough to make it work? Maybe so, but I'm just not seeing it. The other thing with Cam Robinson that I'll say, and I'm like, this kind of just slid under the radar, I think, throughout the back half of the season, because at first you gave him credit for coming in mid-season and acclimating to the environment. But if you really look back at this past season, Cam Robinson gave up more pressures than any other tackle in the NFL throughout the season, 2024. More pressures than any other tackle. 64. That's 10 more than the next tackle, Trevor Penning of the New Orleans Saints. His efficiency rating, if you're looking at PFF, which is like the amount of pressures that he gives up per snap, he was second worst in the NFL, ahead of only Nicholas Petit-Frere in Tennessee. So, he struggled mightily. There's no sugarcoating that. And now the question that I think you got to ask, well, is that because he was on an island because the Vikings had to help the interior? I think that's part of it. Is that because the Vikings love to throw the ball downfield, which means deeper which means more time to pass protect? I think that's probably another facet to it. Now, you guys are probably asking that, why were there so many deep drops if you know you got to leave Cam Robinson one-on-one? Well, Sam Darnold liked to hold the ball. So it becomes a question for Kevin O'Connell. Should we have quicker? And the other aspect is the way the way defenses play Justin Jefferson with press coverage and double coverage. That doesn't often lend itself to quick game. Now, could they have been better with screens? Definitely. Could they have been better blocking on the edge with swing patterns, bubble screens? Yes. There are a lot of issues. There's a lot of lack of execution. There are a lot of ifs. If they done this and this, and I always say, I used to say that with baseball, the more ifs you have in your lineup, the more likely it is that your lineup's not going to be very good. And it's the same way. If you have to cover for Cam Robinson, and if you have to force Sam Darnold to get the ball, it becomes a difficult challenge. So the point is, I don't know if we talked enough down the stretch about how much of a maybe liability that Cam Robinson had become on the left side of the line of scrimmage. And then as for him coming back here, it's just really it's difficult for me to envision that at this point right now. Sam Darnold. Obviously, like, it depends on the market. And then would the Vikings franchise tag Sam Darnold? Do they think they could? Do they think another team would have the cap space and the willingness to trade for him that would generate a pick in return that would be better than what the Vikings could get by comp pick a year later? You look at other teams that might be interested in Sam Darnold, and it's hard to find one that could absorb that franchise tag number, which is like around 40 million, and also be able to do other things. The only team that makes a ton of sense in that regard is the Raiders, which I think is why you've seen a lot of people nationally talk about the Raiders as a landing spot for Sam. But I will also say, we still have to see who the Raiders hire and what that infrastructure looks like, because Sam Darnold is a guy who very well understands the value of the infrastructure, having been in New York and Carolina and then segueing to San Francisco and here. Yes, like, these guys covet money. There's no question, as most human beings would. You're going to take a great deal, but he is also, I know this, going to be mindful of what that looks like in terms of who he's working with coaching wise, and just the environment around them. So what I would say is, as we sit here now, the Darnold question remains one, but given the Vikings' needs and their lack of draft picks, what I would say is the path that makes sense is to go with J.J. McCarthy as a rookie quarterback, and then some kind of option to pair with him, whether that is a Daniel Jones or another option. That is just what makes sense now. But I'm not saying that is going. I don't. If in the event that gets aggregated, that's fine, because that's the reality. But things can change, markets can change, information about the market can affect both my forecast of it and also people internally. So that's what I'd say there. Harrison Smith is the next free agent. Part of it is does he want to continue playing? And he's always said, and been very forward about the fact that he believes if he can still play at the level that he's played at, it's going to be really hard to hang it up. Now, I will say, after the loss to the Rams in Arizona, he was more emotional than I remember him being the year before. You could read into that however you like, but he loves playing for Brian Flores. If Brian Flores does not get a head coaching job and he's back, I think that would go a long way towards him coming back. And then a lot of it for Harrison's also probably going to be like, how much does he believe in what this team could accomplish? I know he really liked JJ, both the presence and what he did during training camp. So just wouldn't rule that one out. Now, Byron Murphy Jr. is a very interesting one. His agent is Zeke Sandu of Clutch Sports, same agent as Daniil Hunter. So there is history of a guy who was represented by a team who performed well, who the team liked, but may not want to pay top of market, leaving in free agency. It's probably going to be pretty expensive. Byron is still a young guy. I'll give you the exact age here, but Byron Murphy is still just 27 years old, and he just turned 27. So he's a very recent 27. And young players are often sought in free agency. They rarely hit. And so and he's coming off a really good year. It was easily his best year in Minnesota. Felt like he found the role and the priority, the role and kind of the ask of him just made a lot of sense. So I also you just don't see cornerbacks hit the market at this age who can really provide, and he was also healthy throughout the whole year. And I think that's also been a question for Byron is like, can he prove a consistent string of health over time? I mean, the number for him is going to be pretty interesting. Like, you have Pro Football Focus, they projected around like 17 million average annual value. Diamador Lenore got like 17.9. And then you have like a younger guy, Michael Carter, who got like 10.25. So, I mean, for me, it's probably somewhere in that range, like the 15 range, the 16 range, 17 range. And that's a lot of money. And the Vikings obviously have to weigh where they're going to spend their salary cap space. Would they prefer to take another stab at a Byron Murphy type for like a 7 million to be able to then, or a couple of those guys to be able to then disperse the money elsewhere? I mean, those are the questions. I think it's possible, but it really probably is going to depend on the market, how far another team's willing to go. Byron, I mean, obviously he's not from here. He wasn't drafted here. There is not the like cachet of remaining here, other than the fact that he has loved it here. I do know that. And the environment is, I mean, very well respected among all players. So we'll see there. Stephon Gilmore, it's hard for me to see him back. I mean, depending on the value, we'll see if he continues playing. I mean, I can't, I'll never forget. I mean, after in week 17, they played the Packers, obviously, this year. And they played almost 50% man coverage, which was just out of nowhere. And you could tell that it got to Jordan Love. You could tell that the Packers staff was not expecting that because the Vikings had not played that amount of man coverage. And it's hard to and it would have been hard on the other sideline to think that they would be willing to do that. But I'll never forget after that game in the locker room, and Gilmore sitting at his chair, I mean, he was just absolutely exhausted. And so, I mean, at some point, you think that with Brian Flores, the more he can get to more man coverage, I think I think he would like that. I think that they would like that as a staff. I mean, part of the reason the Vikings signed Stephon was Mekhi Blackman's injury, obviously in training camp. So harder for me to envision. Aaron Jones at running back, I definitely think it's possible. Like I think people have gone in one way or another. Like I've seen people since the season ended say like, oh, he's totally cooked. I mean, the guy had 1,500 yards from scrimmage. He was very effective in the passing game, and then I thought there were times where he really showed bursts in the run game. And then I also, I mean, I don't want to make it out to be that he is the star level of a Saquon, of a Josh Jacob, Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, he's obviously he's not that, but he was a massive locker room presence. For him, I mean, with a lot of these guys, it's obviously market dependent, but if you could get him back for like a 1 year, $7 million type deal like he had this past year, I mean, it's going to be intriguing, especially given the fact that the market is not flush with a ton of free agent running backs. So to me, him coming back, it's definitely a possibility. Even if he does, I've said this on the podcast, I think it's very, very likely, almost like pretty close to certainty, the Vikings draft a running back in a class that is full of good running backs. I mean, last night, I'm speaking Tuesday, but last night, Monday, I mean, you're watching Quinshon Judkins of Ohio State, and you're watching Travion Henderson. And those guys, like either one of those guys in Minnesota would make sense to me. And then to have them learn under a guy like Aaron Jones, why not? And then if there's a ton of these older guys that leave, I mean, that is a major leadership presence that would be absent. So I think it's possible. Shaq Griffin, he's kind of in the Stephon Gilmore range for me. He obviously will not cost as much, but it felt like even during the middle part of the season, the Vikings preferred to play Byron Murphy and Stephon Gilmore on the edges, and then even Josh Metellus as like the slot defender. So with Mekhi Blackman coming back, potentially Dwight McGlothern developing into a player who could playing meaningful snaps. If they sign a cornerback, to me, it would probably have to be more impactful to kind of replace the Gilmore void, or even Byron Murphy if he signs elsewhere. Jerry Tillery, I think it's possible as a interior defender on the defensive line. I also think this is a spot in the draft that just makes a ton of sense, and you can't really get guys on the interior that can rush the passer unless you do it pretty early. So, I mean, whether it's trading back to the early second and recouping a pick or two extra, and doing it there, I think that's a possibility, or whether it's just picking it at 24. But Jerry Tillery, I thought he was solid in run defense. Not going to blow anybody away. He's like in the Jonathan Bullard mode. Like, I think Jonathan Bullard meant a lot to the locker room. He did a very admirable job run stopping. Both those guys are in a similar category for me in terms of bringing them back. Dalton Reisner, I don't really see it down the stretch. Just struggled, I mean, mightily against the Rams. I remember checking his PFF grade after one of those last couple of games and being like, the film does not match that for me on tape. And obviously, he was playing right guard. He is suited better to left guard. That's where he played for the majority of his career. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we can underscore it or underline it enough that revamping the interior of the offensive line with productive guys is a focal point, and so it's just hard for me to see it. Johnny Munt, he's like one of Kevin O'Connell's favorite players, so I pencil him in on my roster. That's for dang sure. Brandon Powell, I mean, this is one of those areas that we don't talk enough about. It's not sexy to talk about, but special teams for this team just has not been good. Special teams has not been good over the 3 years that Kevin O'Connell has been here. I'm going to give you the DVOA, which is the kind of all end all be all metric over the last 3 years where the Vikings ranked in special teams DVOA, because I was looking at this and it got to me earlier. 27th this year in special teams DVOA. Last year, 30th, 2022, 30th. I mean, you're hovering near the bottom. And I mean, like, some people might, well, what about Matt Daniels, special teams coordinator? Like, for me, I mean, the talent on that unit just, I mean, punting, Ryan Wright's inconsistency has been what it's been. Greg Joseph's inconsistency until this year was what it was. But Brandon Powell's a punt returner. I believe there was a fumble in a Philadelphia game in 2023. But other than that, he's maintained the ball, but he is not generating hidden yardage. And so I would almost guarantee that the Vikings try to increase the juice at that position this offseason. Dan Feeney, don't have a ton to say on him, or David Questenberry. I think both those guys maybe as backups, but again, just fortifying the depth and the quality there just has to be a priority. Trent Sherfield, I think they really liked him, both in the locker room, what he meant as kind of a veteran voice. He was pretty good on special teams as a gunner. And then he could block in the run game as a receiver. So definitely an option. Probably not going to cost a ton. Just kind of makes sense. Jihad Ward was a hilarious figure in the locker room that the stories will remain in the locker room probably of some of the stuff that he said, but always was fun. And I enjoyed the conversations I had with him. He's going to be above 30. But Brian Flores, I know, really liked him. So if that is possible at a certain cost, definitely see that. I could see it happening. Fabian Moreau, I think, is kind of interesting. When he played, I believe Stephon Gilmore got injured during the Cardinals game, maybe. Injured his hamstring. I could be wrong on the week, but I believe that's the case. And Fabian Moreau filled in. I know he got flagged maybe, but I thought he looked pretty good. Didn't play a ton throughout the year, but as a depth cornerback or like a guy to have in training camp at the very least, I could see it. Kamu Grugier-Hill, Definitely think he could be back as a backup linebacker, special teams guy. Was really liked in the locker room. Pat Jones. We'll see what the market looks like for Pat Jones initially, given the way he started the season with multiple sacks. I was kind of wondering, like, could this be like the DJ Wana mark? I don't think he's going to get close to what DJ got, but it'll be interesting. I always find it funny. You hear a lot like, well, Dallas Turner will just take his snaps, but Patrick Jones paid a lot of snaps like on the interior, almost for the real football people, like the 5 technique, kind of head up over some of the offensive linemen. So we'll see. Cam Akers, definitely think it's a possibility. The staff loves him, but if they draft a player, I don't know if Cam Akers can be a lead back at this point. He's not exceptional in pass protection, and that's just important. Let's see here. Cam Bynum, I saved him for last, and he was really at the bottom, but he's another really tough one, kind of just like Byron Murphy Jr. And I've said this before, but his agency is Clutch Sports as well, just like Byron Murphy, not the same agent. His agent is Demarius Bilbo. But Cam Bynum, they negotiated an extension prior to the season. It just didn't happen. Cam Bynum went on Dan Barrero's show after the season. He's thinking like it's over, but he's praying that it's not. Like I said, it's tough because he is another young player at a position that can be fairly expensive. Last year Xavier McKinney, his average annual value was like $16.75 million. And that might even be low for the production that guy offers, which would mean it was a good signing by the Packers. But you look at another younger guy like Darnell Savage in Jacksonville, got like 7.25. So I know that's like a $10 million gap, but let's say Cam Bynum hovers around 12, 13 million. PFF projected him around 14 million. So the question that the Vikings would have to ask is like, well, what is Harrison Smith? What's his future look like? Josh Metellus, I think the preference would be that he's not the deep half safety. Could you get Hufanga from the 49ers at a lower cost? Would they want to do that? Justin Reed in Kansas City is an accomplished player, good player. Javon Holland would be like the real big swing if Brian Flores wanted a guy that played for him in Miami. And so we'll see. It becomes pretty tough. Could Theo Jackson fill one of those roles? I think he could. He's impressed every time we've seen him in real action. So it's a tough one. It's at the safety spot, that could probably be another draft option later as just a possibility. So we'll see there. But that's kind of the run through and how I'm feeling about it right now. We'll revisit this probably right around free agency, around the combine, because at that point I will have a lot more intel, obviously. But thought it'd be worth running through it today as like a Tuesday evening little appetizer for you. But no, I appreciate you guys listening. As always, it's fun to go through some of this stuff. Hopefully we'll have a guest later this week to talk through anything and everything Vikings. And like I said, we'll do some different stuff over the course of these next few weeks. But the combine's a month from now. So in the lead up to that, there will be questions coming out of that. There will be conversation points to be had. And the owners' meetings is late March into April. And then there's the draft. So there's a lot to talk through, a lot to sort through. At some point, you'll hit spring workouts and can give you what I'm seeing out there every day. So should be fun. Stick with us at the Alec Lewis Show. We will be back later this week. As always, presented by First Resource Bank. And if you're new to YouTube here, please hit that subscribe button. Helps us out. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, like, rate, review, all that good stuff. Enjoy the rest of your week. Stay as warm as you can. And we will catch you very, very soon.